Voy a iniciar dándole la bienvenida a Michael Collyer y posteriormente voy a darles un poco el plan de trabajo que tenemos para el día de hoy. Michael, it's a true pleasure to have you here in el Colegio de la Frontera Norte. We are very grateful to you having taken time of your busy schedule here in Los Angeles to come down to COLEF and attend this meeting and to share with us some of your work on migration and to give us an opportunity to our researchers and our postgraduate students to share with you some of the migrations job they do in COLEF. Peter is going to present you, so I'm not going to do that part. But before we start, I wanted to tell everyone what are we going to do this morning. I'm going to do it in Spanish. Vamos a iniciar con la plática del doctor Michael Collyer. Posteriormente, vamos a iniciar con la presentación que Peter Mueller, estudiante del doctorado, va a hacer del doctor Michael Collyer. Luego vamos a pasar a la sesión de intervención de los investigadores del COLEF, quienes brevemente van a presentar el trabajo que hacen en el COLEF sobre migración. Pasamos posteriormente a la presentación de los estudiantes, que son bastantes. Cada uno de ellos va a presentar una diapositiva con el título y el objetivo. Les cuento que esa información ya la tiene Michael en sus papeles a un lado, de manera que los puede ir siguiendo allí. Y finalmente pasamos a una sesión de comentarios. De allí a las 2:10, esperamos que el tiempo lo podamos manejar la mejor forma posible, nos vamos a la comida. Ok, iniciamos con Peter. Peter.
Muchas gracias, doctora, y también bienvenido a todos, la comunidad del COLEF, y muchas gracias por los organizadores de este intercambio académico. I'm very delighted to welcome also Michael Collyer. Michael Collyer is a senior lecturer in geography during 2012-2013, and the academic year he has a Fulbright scholarship and was based in the Department of Geography at the University of Washington in Seattle, where he concluded, like right now, he concluded his sabbatical. During his Fulbright scholarship, he did research on migration across the US-Canada border, and he also taught at the University of Washington. Before his appointment as a lecturer, he's lecturer at the Sussex University in the UK. He held a 3-year Marie Curie Outgoing International Fellowship based at the University of Colombo in Sri Lanka. He was previously a Nuffield Foundation New Career Development Fellow at Abdelmalek Saidi University in Tétouan, Morocco, and he completed his PhD on the dynamics of the Euro-Algerian migration system in 2002. Michael is primarily a political geographer with an interest in the relationship between people on the move and states. His research focuses on 3 main areas: undocumented migration, detention and return, forced migration, internal displacement and refugee movement, and the geopolitics of migration control. So Michael, his research projects move in these specific areas. He did work on undocumented migrants and refugees in Morocco. He also collaborated with the European Commission, the Economic Social Research Council, and other foundations. His current research includes continuing work on migration, inequality, and social change in Sri Lanka, undocumented migration in the Euro-Mediterranean region, and also the particular context on political transitions in North Africa. So, having introduced Michael, it's all up to you right now. Welcome and thank you for sharing this space with us here at the Collyer. Michael will present his presentation on fragmented migration, protection, implications of global inequalities in access to mobility.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Peter, for that introduction. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you to Josefina. It's nice to see you in front of me there. Firstly, an apology that I'm going to be speaking in English. I'm ashamed of my Spanish, and you would understand a lot more of speaking in English. So apologies for the English presentation. I'll try and speak slowly and clearly so that those of you whose English is not probably still better than my Spanish, but perhaps not up to. Thank you. We'll be able to follow more clearly. It's a real honour to be here at the Collyer. It's my first visit. I've long followed the research that goes on here. I think this is one of the most interesting and active areas of migration research anywhere in the world, really. So it's very exciting to present here for me, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to do so. What I want to present today, I'll try and keep it within about 40 minutes. But I'd like to present a new theoretical perspective that I'm working on, based on mostly on research in North Africa. Also partly related to work in Sri Lanka that I can talk about later. This presentation is focused mainly on Morocco, around transit migration, undocumented migration into Morocco. And there's a number of publications that this draws on. I'll leave this PowerPoint here, so if anyone is interested in following these up, then you're very welcome. But these are the range of publications that have come out of this research over the last 4 or 5 years, in a variety of different journals. What I want to talk about is briefly something about the global context of mobility, essentially a reduction globally in opportunities to move, while there is an increase in information, and this creates a certain tension. And out of this tension, I talk about what I've called fragmented migration, the theoretical basis of this talk. Empirically, as I said, I'm situating this in the context of movement between Morocco and the European Union, although I hope it's relevant to other places. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is whether this sort of framework is related in any way to the situation in Mexico. Then I want to talk about the role that migrants themselves play in this. I think it's very important in any sort of theoretical approach to migration to consider migrants themselves as strategic actors in this. And then I'll conclude, and hopefully there will be time for some questions and discussion afterwards. So at a global level, there are just 4 points I want to make. Firstly, that access to international mobility is limited and increasingly unequal. There is a very significant disparity between the opportunities to move globally, significantly depending on the passport that people have, but beyond that, depending on access to resources. That international migration takes very significant resources, often far out of proportion to the average income per capita of many countries in the world. In Sri Lanka, for example, a university professor, relatively well-paid individual in society, would have to save up for 3 months' salary just to pay for a standard price air ticket to London. So just on the basis of cost alone, there is a very significant inequality. And if we apply the various political restrictions on mobility, that clearly exacerbates that difficulty. But in contrast to this, the second point, one of the things that has happened over the past 20 years, really, particularly with the expansion of the internet, but also the democratization of satellite television, various other sorts of information, is that access to information on global destinations is increasingly widespread. Research I've done, for example, in refugee camps in West Africa, individuals who are living in very poor shelters have a television in the shelter with some sort of DVD player, watching films about Los Angeles or about Paris or a variety of significant destinations. So they have information, often inaccurate information, about the potential attractiveness of these destinations. So there's a tension there between the limited possibilities to move and the greater access to information about places that people might want to move to. And what mediates that tension is essentially migration policy. People want to move, they are unable to move because various sorts of immigration, in some cases even emigration policy, prevent them from doing so. One of the interesting connections between Morocco and Sri Lanka is that both of them have passed migration legislation in the past few years, 2003 in Morocco, 2006 in Sri Lanka, which were labelled immigration and emigration control policies. So Morocco and Sri Lanka are attempting to control the emigration of their own citizens, largely in response to pressure from the European Union. So illegal emigration is actually a criminal offence in Morocco, and individuals can be put in prison for attempting to leave the country through an improper channel. So there are a variety of policy controls on international movement that prevent people fulfilling these desires for mobility. But policy is often used as one of the main explanatory frameworks in this, particularly in the area that I'm most familiar with, in the European Union, where people talk a lot about the externalization of European Union migration policy, pushing European Union migration controls into neighbouring countries. But I think policy alone isn't sufficient to explain these structural changes in migration systems. A range of additional, often technological factors, I think, are required. When we look particularly at migration across the Sahara, which is the route that many people take to get into Morocco. Going back even 15 years to the late 1990s, when I first visited Morocco, it was almost impossible to get an internet connection. You would have to go to the most expensive international hotels in Rabat, and you would have to pay a lot of money, $10 or $15 for an hour. Now, any city has internet cafes all over the place where you pay a few cents to get online, and it's possible to be connected moving through Morocco for a lot less money than before. And this is the case across the Sahara. At that time, to continue to maintain telephone access, for example, in the middle of the Sahara Desert would have required a satellite telephone. Now it's possible to do it on an ordinary mobile connection because the development of internet and mobile communications has improved so dramatically over the last 15 years in that area that it's possible to remain connected. Similarly, international money transfer. Western Union opened an office in Tamanrasset in the desert south of Algeria in 2003, barely 10 years ago. So it's possible for migrants moving through that area, this is essentially for migrants moving through the area, to receive money often from relatives in Europe that they're attempting to get to, but in some cases even relatives back home. So there are a range of technological changes that have allowed people without very much money in regions like West Africa to access destinations that 10 or 15 years ago would have required much more money to access. So what we're seeing, I think, is an expansion of migration systems in areas like West Africa. Possibly that's the case for Central America as well, into areas that people wouldn't otherwise have been able to access. And policy, various sorts of migration policy, of border control policy, are attempting to respond to this. So this is the sort of context that I want to talk about. Theoretically, there are two opposing tendencies here, I think. One is a tendency towards what has been called supermobility, the sort of frequent international business traveller, fast track, the sort of passes to cross borders much more frequently. What my colleague at the University of Washington, Matt Spark, refers to as an economically induced immunity from delay is a nice phrase that he refers to as the sort of prepay border crossing fast track possibilities that you can get that are obviously applicable to the border just here as much as they are to the border between North Africa and Southern Europe. So there's a significant policy basis that revolves around very intensive pre-departure authorization, digital screening, digital verification, that is a precondition for this sort of supermobility. The other tendency that's often referred to as stepwise migration is apparent in the literature looking at migration from very early on. Ravenstein's Laws of Migration, some of you may be familiar with. He was a clergyman, an English clergyman in the late 19th century who studied rural migration essentially in the UK and came up with these laws of migration, some of which are tremendously outdated now. Others have a degree of accuracy. And this is one, I think, that one of these laws, according to Ravenstein, is that under normal conditions the migratory movement will be a gradual one. It will proceed step by step and will be transmitted from province to province. So individuals, rather than move from a tiny village to international destinations, individuals would move from a village to a larger town, to a city, and from there internationally. And to a certain extent, I think there's a degree of validity in this observation. And others have attempted to follow this in a whole variety of contexts. This is just a brief literature review on stepwise migration. The ECOWAS region in West Africa, for example, John Anafi found that migrants to Ghana, to the main city in Ghana, in Accra, 72% of them intended to move on. So they had moved from rural areas within Ghana to the capital, and they intended to migrate internationally. And these other groups that I've listed there, there's been some evidence in the literature that this sort of gradual movement applies. In some cases it doesn't apply. And the Development on the Move project, also based in Ghana and Jamaica, found that there was a significant tendency for individuals to migrate, even from quite small rural communities, internationally, directly, because the information was available to them. So there is, I'm not saying that this applies universally. I think there's a variety of evidence in the literature about how stepwise migration works. But that's one of the bases that I think this idea of fragmented migration draws upon. So fragmented migration is a particular articulation of movement. It's a particular type of movement that responds to these sorts of migration controls. The controls on movement being resources, essentially how much money do people have access to, not just in terms of finance, but also in terms of things like land that they can sell or jewellery in some cases. And the second control is policy. But there are also new facilitators of movement, particularly information, as I mentioned, and technology that allow people to move in ways that wouldn't have been possible relatively recently for much less money than it would have cost. To travel overland from West Africa across the Sahara into Morocco 20 years ago would have been a very major expedition and would have required an awful lot of satellite phone support, this kind of thing. Now people can do it on the sort of technology that most of us have in our pockets. And there are significant protection implications for this type of movement. There is an area of refugee studies focused on the onward migration. In some cases, individuals that I've been interviewing over the last few years in Morocco have previously been recognized as refugees in a variety of West African refugee situations. And this is something that we might call self-resettlement. This is individuals who have been living in refugee camps, in some cases for most of their lives, for the last 10 or 15 years, who don't see any possibility of a future in the refugee camp in which they're living, so they attempt to move on. In other cases, the journeys themselves provoke some sort of protection risk. The journeys themselves are very dangerous undertakings, and even if individuals don't have a claim for refugee status under the 1951 Convention, there is clearly a significant humanitarian concern about what happens to individuals when they undertake these sorts of very high-risk journeys. The documentation of fatalities across the Mediterranean is now fairly well established, although there's a degree of uncertainty because it's clear that on the crossing from West Africa to the Canary Islands, for example, a significant number of individuals lose their lives who are never accounted for. Their bodies are never washed up on the shore, they're never counted anywhere. Although it's possible to trace back the individuals who leave, who no one hears from again, there is a real difficulty in establishing a definite human cost of these types of journeys. And similarly across the Sahara, that it's very uncertain how many people attempt to enter the Sahara and simply don't make it. In terms of refugee status, the decision that is made when an individual arrives in a European country, for example, and makes a claim for asylum, the decision is based on the context of departure, on where they were living previously and the sort of risks that they faced at that particular moment. But for individuals who have been travelling for 5, sometimes 10, even 15 years, moving around the Sahara border towns looking for various sorts of work, the context of departure is pretty remote, and it's very difficult to make a judgment on protection on the basis of a situation that someone hasn't lived in for some time. But the implications of removal in these cases are potentially equally serious. Removing someone, deporting someone to a situation where they could face ongoing harm is obviously a very serious policy judgment. And in these cases, even though individuals haven't lived in a country for some time, the possibilities of deporting them to that country are potentially very serious. One of the terms the international organisation use for this situation is stranded migrants. Migrants who are unable to continue to move on because they've run out of money or because they've reached a particular border which they can't cross. And they are unwilling to return, partly because they've invested so much money getting to that point, partly because the situation that they would be returning to is so unfavourable to them. puts them in a significantly vulnerable situation, and they're often at risk in some cases from smugglers or traffickers, in some cases from various other criminal gangs who want to extract any resources that they might have access to. In the context of the European Union and Morocco, I'll go briefly over this sort of policy history. The European Union-Moroccan border has changed function since the early 1990s. The Single European Act, or the Maastricht Act, named after the town in which it was signed. This reduced border controls within the European Union and led to this idea that didn't really exist before, of something called European space. And obviously, as a geographer, that's a particularly interesting understanding of what is European space in this context. This is a term that comes up with increasing regularity within European Union policy documents since 1992. The border has also changed location. From the early 1990s, work by people like Aristide Zolberg has highlighted the function of remote controls, the requirement for visas being gradually instituted. It's interesting to remember how recent the requirement for visas in most cases is. For Moroccan nationals, it was only in 1991 that they required a visa to enter Spain, barely 20 years ago. It's a relatively recent development. This is gradually being pushed out, so that Morocco, for example, again largely under pressure from the European Union, now has visa controls on 42 of 47 significant sub-Saharan African countries where there is significant movement to Morocco. So where Morocco, the Moroccan government, had wished to have a relatively open attitude towards other African countries, it is now having to close off some of these mobility relationships. And from the mid-1990s, the border also began to move inwards into European Union countries. So, for example, when individuals want to access some kind of essential service, when they want to use a hospital, for example, any sort of healthcare facility, they are increasingly asked for evidence of their migration status. So the border is not just at the physical frontier, but it exists at a variety of other points within the countries. This is a photo of the border between the Spanish enclave of Melilla in the north of Morocco and the Moroccan mainland. This is a particularly interesting border because it's one that the Moroccan government doesn't actually recognise. The Moroccan government claims sovereignty over both Melilla and Ceuta, which is about 300 kilometres away on the Moroccan coast. They're both very tiny cities. For those of you who don't know the geography of that part of the world, they have a population of about 50 or 60,000 people each. And the borders between the cities themselves and the Moroccan, the rest of Morocco, are only about 5 kilometres. But these fences cost about 10 million euros. That's about $15 million a kilometre to construct. I think that's probably comparable to the fences at the US-Mexican border. And these indicate a changing nature of the border, that if we go back even 20 or 30 years, borders were controlled at particular points of entry. There were identified points that you had to cross, and for the rest of the border there was, in many cases, barely even a fence. These fences here, the Ceuta-Melilla fences, were only erected in 1999, and before that it was relatively easy to walk across at any point, but people weren't really expected to because they had to cross at the identified border point. Since then, in the EU context, over the last 10 or 15 years, there's been this development of controls along the line of the border, these kind of high security fences. And there's a developing tendency for aerial control outwards beyond the border. If we look at what is happening to the border, this is again the EU Moroccan border. We have what are now 6-metre steel fences, 2 fences with tear gas diffusion systems, various sorts of radar, day-night security cameras, very high security borders with detection wires that are sort of broadening out the borderline. So there's an entire area that is occupied by the border, and this I know is something that is familiar to people here, so I don't need to dwell on it. In addition to these sort of direct physical controls, there's a variety of other responses, particularly around information campaigns. This illustration is from a book sponsored by the German government, interestingly, and delivered to primary schools in Senegal, called L'Aventure Mortelle. And you can see the theme of this book from the cover, really. That this is about a group of undocumented migrants who leave from Senegal, attempting to reach the Canary Islands, and run into all sorts of tremendous difficulties and dangers. So this is an attempt to publicise the tremendous danger of these migrations at a very young age, at primary school, within Senegal, in an attempt to dissuade migrants from making the journey. So there is a movement from direct control to a sort of broader management of populations. These primary school children aren't being prevented from migrating, they're just being informed of the potential risks. And from an attempt to control territory to an attempt to control particular populations, which I think is interesting. So there's a move towards management of populations and management of information in the developing nature of these controls. This is another poster sponsored by the Moroccan government and a variety of NGOs, directed significantly in this case at Moroccan nationals. The Arabic at the bottom says more or less what the Spanish at the top does. But there's some very interesting research that's been done in Senegal on this, and one of the comments from one of my colleagues who works there, called Papa Demba Fall, is from individuals who say, we know it's dangerous. You know, the knowledge that it's dangerous is not going to stop us migrating. In some cases, the danger is a sort of essential rite of passage for some of the young men who are involved in this. And in Morocco itself, there's a widespread awareness of dangers. So it leads us to think that information campaigns such as this one, which warn people of the potential dangers of undocumented migration, are not really likely to have that much of an impact. Migrants themselves are clearly very much involved in the development of these processes. In Morocco, during the decade or so that I've been doing research there, the duration of stay has increased quite dramatically. It was possible in the late 1990s for an individual from West Africa to come into Morocco to stay maybe a couple of weeks before moving on. The most recent research that's been done by colleagues at the University of Rabat has found that individuals stay on average just over 2 years in Morocco before they are able to move on. So there is an increasing duration of stay. There's also an increasing tendency amongst individuals to accept that their residence in Morocco is permanent, that even though they may have come into Morocco in the hope of moving on to Europe, the difficulties of that move and the potential opportunities of finding work in Morocco mean that they say, well, I might as well stay in Morocco. The journey itself has a tremendous range of experiences, from individuals who might fly into Morocco directly with a visa in the hope of moving on, to individuals who have spent months, even years, moving around the Sahara. In terms of the human rights response, there are now a range of civil society organisations, many of them European organisations, funded by the European Union in a sort of semi-paradoxical situation, to support the human rights needs of migrants in this situation. But there are very limited possibilities for even informal access to state services for undocumented migrants. Just one quick illustration of a guy I interviewed in 2005 in Rabat. He had left the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in 1996. He moved to Brazzaville. The circles on the map show the points of his journey. He moved to Brazzaville in 97. He stayed there for 5 years. Moved on to Lagos in Nigeria in 2002, and then moved fairly quickly in 2002 to Agadez, to Ceuta in Libya, and to the town of Magnia on the Algerian-Moroccan frontier. 2005, he came from Magnia to Rabat, where I interviewed him. I stayed in touch with him, and he spent 3 years in Morocco before he was able to make it to Brussels, where he found work in 2008. So that's the kind of very, very lengthy, very complex journey, which I don't want to suggest is the norm. I mean, there's a wide variety of journeys, but this is an illustration of the sort of nature of these kinds of what I've called fragmented migrations that lead people to move in a variety of different contexts and directions. Some statistics for you briefly. They are partial and problematic. I'm sorry, they haven't come out too well on this. The dates haven't come out too well on here. These are based on apprehensions. An apprehension statistic, this is the people who are caught attempting to leave Morocco to come into the European Union. And they're very difficult to interpret, because you don't know how many people have got through who haven't been apprehended. The numbers here suggest that over this period there is a significant decline, and this decline has continued. And estimates of the resident undocumented population in Morocco vary between 10,000 and 25,000. I mean, the important thing to note in all of these figures is that they're relatively small numbers of people. If we're looking at a total undocumented movement into the European Union of about 500,000 a year, which is the sort of standard estimate that most people work to. The movements through Morocco are clearly a very small part of this 500,000 people a year, yet they have attracted tremendous attention. In terms of the various sorts of civil society organisations that work in this area, the most recent research that I've done has mostly focused on the sort of responses, civil society responses. There's a variety of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, for example, works on protection. Caritas, a Catholic charity, focuses on providing livelihood and work. Médecins Sans Frontières provides health support, and other organisations provide some sort of education. The difficulty is that all of these services are provided by non-state organisations, so they're often challenged by the state, and there isn't really any sort of long-term response in this case from the Moroccan state. Many of these individuals are funded by these organisations are funded by the European Union. In terms of government services, there's no access to state resources officially. In some cases, there is a sort of informal access to the labour market. Morocco is a signatory to the Convention on the rights of all migrant workers and members of their families. And the 2011 constitution in Morocco was tremendously progressive in this area and guarantees the right of certain services, even for undocumented migrants. That seems to be interpreted over the last couple of years, since 2011, with some variability. There's also some talk of a potential regularisation of undocumented migrants in Morocco, although that has yet to appear. So in conclusion, how broadly can this idea of fragmented migration be applied? That's really a question I'd like to leave you with. I think it's significant because it appears to be a structural change in the way that migration takes place towards the European Union, at least. I don't want to overemphasize the significance of this. As you saw, the numbers suggest that it's a relatively small proportion of migrants. But there are individuals who are unable to move on for various reasons, policy or resources. They are unable or unwilling to return to the place they came from, and they are facing a significant situation of vulnerability where they are. Yet, there is a very limited possibility of them claiming international protection under the 1951 Convention. There's no obvious policy intervention in this. The current work that I'm working on is a project that's about to finish. I'm going to return to the UK next month, and we'll go to a meeting in Rabat pretty much straight away at the end of May, of the final meeting on this project that's called Beyond Irregularity, that looks at movement from Nigeria to Morocco and onward to the UK. And one of the conclusions that we're coming to in this project is that the European Union needs some more innovative responses to this sort of movement than simply trying to return people in large numbers. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for the highly informative and magnificent presentation. Maybe we take the opportunity of some questions and answers. We have, before we go on with the program, we have 10 to 15 minutes, so maybe you make 3 questions.
Perhaps one of the topics is really call our attention is that we have been also trying to study this kind of Morocco migration or African migration to the European Union, and we have seen for several years the similarities with this migration from Mexico to the United States or Central America to the United States. And when you put this chart, when the characteristics of the trend of Morocco, more duration, state, and all these kind of characteristics, if you put the Mexican characteristics to the United States, are quite the same. Yeah. So there are tremendous similarity. But what can we, little difference, because when you show also the defense of the Melilla and this part and Morocco and Melilla, well, if you say this is Mexico, United States, yes, we can believe it, that photograph is from here. So there are many. I think the only thing we don't have here in this fence is this kind of tear gas that is is brutal. Yeah. Fortunately, we don't have that kind of. But the characteristics you show this migration, and we compare to the Mexico to the United States, is just the time, the period of time. It seems that in Morocco, the African migration to European Union is in more short time. The period of time is more short than we had been in this process in Mexico to the United States or Central America to the United States. Because also, when you show this route to Brussels, I think so, took 6 or 7 years. Yeah, well, it's the same for the Central American to the United States. Many of them, they take 6 or 7 or perhaps more years because they stay here in several states of Mexico. But it's quite interesting, and fortunately, we will try to look for more comparison to this kind of migration from Africa to the European Union, and also from Central and Mexico to the United States. It seems quite similar. There are some studies right now. I remember this Rio Bravo Mediterráneo. There are some professors here in Collyer and other people in European to try to compare both migration. But thank you for showing us this, and it's quite interesting.
Great, thank you.
Before we go on, we have two more interventions here. We are connected to the College in Monterrey, Dr. Josefina Perez. I don't know if you have any questions in Monterrey. Sí, te presentas, por favor.
Carlos Galindo, Instituto Independiente. I want to thank you for your interesting presentation. I was thinking exactly the same. There are a lot of similarities with Mexico. But also, I talked like 2 years ago with people from the government of Poland and Hungary, and they were expressing just the same as you did, and they told me that they foresee the future of Mexico quite like what happened in Poland and Hungary. They were selling countries. Now they have changed. Thank you. Now they have changed, and now they have these very dramatic policies trying to stop immigrants to coming into Poland. And what I was thinking, and I wanted to ask you, is what kind of future do you foresee for this type of countries like Mexico, like Morocco, like Poland, like Hungary? Maybe a joint study could be very useful to try to understand like global dynamics of these changes. But also, what kind of future do you foresee? Could we move on to a more liberal and progressive policy, or are we going into the opposite direction?
Well, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I have a question on your theoretical perspective. I think it's really interesting to see how you are putting together two different theoretical, not only perspective, but different kinds of works that have been done. On the one hand, I think much more by geographers about mobility as a resource, and on the other hand, about specifically migration. And I think both theoretical perspectives are useful, but not very frequently put together. And then my question is, how you think it would be more productive to work together with these two theoretical frameworks? Should we think about migration like one particular singular way of mobility, and then just treat it as all the other ways of mobility, then to see migration as a particular case of mobility? Or if we should move forward and think that migration is a very singular case of mobility and should be treated with a different perspective, with a different theoretical framework. I think both perspectives are useful, but I'm not really clear about how should we put them together. So I would like to ask you, in your particular research, how are you dealing with those different perspectives that are coming from different traditions, but that are finally interested in similar particular cases or issues?
Maybe we could include one more intervention from Monterrey, la doctora Pérez.
Hi, sorry. It was my fault. I pushed the wrong button. Well, I want to thank Michael, because I know that it wasn't easy just to leave family in San Diego and have an escape from home, but thank you. Well, I think this is a great moment to explore more about the similarities between the case Mexico and Morocco. I think we should continue on that question that we discussed in our previous meeting about transnational politics. When you were talking about, again, what was happening with this migration from the south, I was recalling, and I know my colleagues are pretty much aware of what is going on now, on in the case of this humanitarian crisis that we are experiencing, especially with all those Mexicans deported to the border, to the Mexican border. And that's exactly what you were now talking about, what was happening with all these North African migrants being returned to Africa, and especially to North Africa. And the other similarity that I like you could explore a little bit more is about what are the negotiation going on between, especially Morocco and the European Union when it comes to deal with the returning of migration and also the aid that they are receiving from the Europe countries, or from the European countries, sorry, specifically recalling this project of MEDA and all this cooperation for development, which is something that is not clear in the Mexican case, because I think we are negotiating more benefits for the diaspora, the Mexican diaspora in the United States, but of course there is something called remittances that is more attractive than just benefits for immigration. And so I'd like you to explore a little bit more on those similarities, if you could explain more about what are the main negotiations going on between Europe and Morocco, especially on those topics. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's 3 really excellent questions. Thank you very much for that. I'll try and take them in order. In terms of the possible future of these migration policies, I mean, that's the $1 million question, really, isn't it? If we could answer that, then we would be well suited to start to plan for that future. The difference between Poland and Hungary on the one hand, and certainly Morocco, I'm less sure about the Mexican context, but focusing on Morocco, is that Poland and Hungary had this possibility of enlargement. So they were included in this European space idea in 2004. And they had all of the benefits of completely free movement within the European Union, or their citizens did. And the sort of counter of that was that they were supposed to defend the external border of Europe on their eastern boundary. So the European negotiations with the 8 Eastern European countries that became members in 2004, and then subsequently with Bulgaria and Romania, has been easier because there has been this possibility of allowing membership to those countries. Whereas Morocco, it's always been clear, Morocco applied to join the European Union in 1986 and was refused immediately because they were told that Morocco wasn't in Europe. Although obviously as a geographer I like to see Europe as a sort of constructed notion that is historically very flexible. So Morocco could be in Europe if we choose to decide that it is. There's nothing geographically fixed about that. But at the time they were told they couldn't be in the European Union. There are similar negotiations going on with Turkey at the moment. To what extent is Turkey a European country? And Turkey still has this possibility of membership, however remote. But Morocco is going to be part of what Romano Prodi in 2003 referred to as Europe's circle of friends. And this links directly to Josefina's question about the current EU-Morocco negotiations. That these negotiations are ongoing in the context of what Europe refers to as the European Neighbourhood Policy. And on the 1st of March this year, really quite recently, the European Union and Morocco reached agreement on a mobility partnership, which is essentially a framework which will allow European countries to facilitate visa access for Moroccan nationals. So it will become easier for Moroccan nationals, particularly in certain categories like students, to get visas to come to European Union countries in return for greater border control at Morocco's southern border. So again, it's a sort of pushing out partly of the benefits of membership, the benefits of this free mobility, although it will still be a highly restricted mobility, but also in the context of this sort of gradual moving out of the border. And I think that responds to this sort of interest that Morocco has in maintaining some sort of flexible relationship with this very significant Moroccan diaspora. The Moroccan emigrants are really quite diverse. There are 5 European countries in which Moroccans are the most significant group of foreign nationals. So it's not like the situation between Mexico and the US where they're all concentrated in one country. But most Moroccan emigrants, about 80% of Moroccan emigrants, are living in one of the EU countries. So there's this definite interest in maintaining some sort of circulation between Morocco for the emigrants. So hopefully that answers Josefina's question too. And on the theoretical question, again, it's a really fascinating point that you were making. Whether there is a distinction between migration and mobility, I was trying to focus on international migration. And in that case, clearly international migration is defined by crossing an international border. And in some cases, that is a relevant distinction, and in some cases it's not a relevant distinction. And I think that's an interesting point to investigate. You know, where and for whom is the passage across an international border relevant or not? When I travel certainly from Calais to the south of Italy, you know, I can do that without having to show my passport at all. What the European Union calls a third country national technically can't do that. There has to be a distinction there. So depending on the passport that you're travelling, if you have a European Union passport, you can move wherever you want to in the European Union. If you don't, then you don't have that sort of mobility. So those borders vary depending on who you are. The European Union refers to movement of one European Union citizen from one EU member country to another, not as migration, but as internal mobility. So there's a definite use of this label of mobility, but only for a certain category of individuals. So in itself, that's an exclusionary term. So there is a very significant distinction here, which I think ultimately is a political distinction between migration and mobility. But that's something that we can talk about for a long time, I think. But it's an interesting question. Maybe I'll stop there. But thank you very much for those questions.
Thank you. I think it's time to go on with the presentations of researchers at the Collyer, and I give word to Dr. Ibanez.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Now it's time for the home to expose, and it's my pleasure to introduce to the 4 professors here who are going to give the presentation: the Dr. Rodolfo Cruz from the Population Studies Department, Dr. Rafael Aracon from Social Studies Department, Guillermo Alonso from Cultural Studies Department, and Eduardo Gonzalez from the MIF project. They have only 15 minutes each. We begin with Rodolfo Cruz, please. Just 15 minutes, please. I'm going to tell you. 15 minutes. I'm going to tell
you. Since they invite me, the organization, to talk about here, but just to talk, I was thinking an informal talk to you, just in what kind of project we are doing. So suddenly we are here in a big room and try to presentation. I don't know, really. I don't have a presentation, really. I just want to talk to you just want to talk to you about what we are doing on migration. There are several groups in Collyer doing migration. I will say perhaps the migration is one of the big issues that is cross-sectional, all the departments, academic departments here at Collyer. But let me go talk to you a little history in terms of migration, because I think it will be more interesting for you how this institution is doing migration from several lands, from several perspectives, actually. And that is one. Perhaps since the beginnings of this Colegio de la Frontera Norte, it had one of the major issues of this is migration. But migration in a broad perspective. That's important because when start to doing research here in this region of the Mexican northern border, we can see that it had been not really data. It was not information. Actually, not just for migration, neither for other issues as health, cultural, and many others issues doing. So perhaps one of the biggest challenges for this institution was to produce data, to produce information system. And this is one of the, I will say, the big shot of this institution, start to produce information, its own data on several issues. Since the beginning, we start doing some kind of surveys. I would say perhaps this is one of the institutions that have more surveys for different issues in the Mexican institution because it was one of the big challenges to produce this and in order to study what's going on in this binational region. And that was a big thing for the institution, and we start with something called ESAF, Encuesta Socioeconómica Anual de la Frontera. That was in the 80s, and it was quite rich because it was not just migration, but there also was what's going on with the city, what's going on with the viviendas, housing, for many other issues. And it was one quite concerned in Mexico in terms of cultural issues, because many people was thinking in that years, in the 80s, latest 80s, that many people, all the people coming to the border, they want to go to United States. That was the perception in that years. So the South, it has one of the main objectives of this was to prove that really those people, they don't want to go to live in the United States. They want to live and stay in the Mexican side. And that's happening. And there are several ESAF and data about that issues. So the migration phenomena, since the beginning, it has been for the College, not just the international migration to the United States. It was also the internal migration. It was perhaps most important to study the internal migration, what's going on for the communities, for the border communities. And it's not this population who live in the borders is quite different than Morocco. It's just 15 or 16,000. Now here we have around 12 million people living in the border. So it's quite important region for the Mexico. So that's one of the point that I want to point out to you, because I think it's important. After this, SAF, there's several continue with other surveys, even the myth that Eduardo will talk later about this specific survey on migration flows. We had doing migration from economic, cultural, sociological, even trying to relate it to another quite issues, urban issues and migration. So it's a very broad perspective of migration, and this is one of the key issues for the college, trying to look migration from several perspectives, and it's when distinguished. Particularly, we have doing migration more specifically, trying to do some kind of estimation of the flows of migration to the border and to the United States. And how this migration flow or immigrants, they insert in the economy, and what kind of employment they get, what kind of occupation. We have been working for several years. Actually, what we are looking right now is a big change in the migration dynamic and the border, and I will say not just the border, I will say for the general total of Mexico is changes the dynamic of migration. And this is for several factors, and many research is doing this, what's going on in this. What I will not to take much time in this, but I would say right now we are in a big project where Elmira, Eduardo, and myself, we're working with some estimation of net migration, but not just for the border. This is for the total territory of Mexico, doing net migration in each state of Mexico. And this is a project for CONACYT and INEGI. This is the National Institute for Statistics in Mexico. And we are doing some kind of estimation for the total. But when we have to do it for the internal migration, how is the people moving from one state to another, we have to take into account this international migration, and the pattern of migration that we've mentioned is changing in these last 5 years. And we look at what's going on and what's happening in the next future for this. There are other research projects that we have been working. There's another book, Iris and Benitez, migration flows to the border, using just data from the myth. Several people from different cities, they were working in this, what kind of flows to the border, how the cities has some changes because this immigration. And well, in this big project, we have different specific issues, trying to project migration also, and some kind of factors associated to these migration flows, what kind of factors is involved with will have more impact in those migration. We'll stay here for okay, but you have more questions.
That's very interesting.
Well, thank you very much. 10 minutes exactly, perfect. So, 10 minutes just. Well, now it's time to present his presentation to Dr. Alarcón.
Thank you very much. Unlike Rodolfo, I have a formal presentation because Sylvia called me and she told me, you need to prepare a formal presentation. What I want to present today is actually an article that Fabiola Galicia and I prepared and we submitted to our journal, the Journal of Comparative Policy Analysis. And so this is a great opportunity for us to discuss our findings with this captive audience. And in that sense, we're going to take advantage of this. I know that I have 15 minutes, and so we're going to go fast. This is where I decided to talk about this particular portion of the Mexican population in the U.S. who do not know much about, and that is the skilled immigrants in the United States. We know a lot about Mexicans who do not have university education, but in this case we're going to focus on the skilled Mexican immigrants, specifically in Los Angeles. And the question is about their labor integration. So we're going to be discussing whether or not these skilled Mexican migrants obtain professional occupations. If they do not obtain professional occupations, then we can start talking about and use this term that is now commonly used in academia, that is brain waste. That is when you do not have access to a professional occupation. Next, please. Oh, I can. Sorry. As a professor, I always have someone to do that. No, I can do it. First, let's define these skilled migrants. The basic definition is we're talking about individuals who have attained university education. That is at least 16 years of education. So all of us here are, we might consider ourselves as potential skilled migrants. And this is a very important definition because it derives from the immigration policy in the US. Because in the United States, they use this definition to grant visas for immigrants coming from all over the world. Well, the growth of this population has to do with the expansion of university education all over the world, including Mexico. Also, the power of corporations who want to bring the best and brightest workers of the world. Also, the implementation of immigrant policies by developed countries, especially in the US and other countries, but also in Europe. Now they are changing their policies to favor the permanent and temporary movement of skilled migrants. This is actually a very interesting case, but I only have 12 minutes. And also the class resources of immigrants. That means we're talking about people who mainly come from middle-class families. So they also have other resources compared to other workers. It is estimated that there are nearly 500,000 Mexican skilled Mexican immigrants in the US. 500,000 out of 12 million. So it's a lot of people. I mean, it's not a high percentage, but it's a lot of people considering the education in Mexico. But there is a lot of debate about this population. And I want to cite a student here, Luis Calva, who argues that members of the 1.5 generation they have to be treated differently from adult immigrants. Because as you know, especially the students from population studies, you know that members of the 1.5 generation resemble the native population because they go through the education in the United States. In the particular case of Los Angeles, there are around 100,000 skilled Mexican migrants. And for the study, we only consider those who were employed in 2008. That is 81% of them. I want to emphasize that in our study, which is a study based on interviews, we only, in this particular article, we only deal with adult immigrants. That means Mexican immigrants who obtained their university education in Mexico and then went to the United States. I can go with this. Let me just show you some data from the American Community Survey to start observing whether or not Mexican immigrants, skilled Mexican immigrants, obtain professional occupations. Here is the labor force employed, and as you can see in this table, only 45% of these skilled Mexican immigrants have a management, professional, or related occupation. The rest, that is more than 50%, 55%, 54%, they are employed in different occupations that are not considered professional. So here we begin to see that there is a problem with this. the professional migrants do not get professional educations. Many of them are concentrated in the construction industry, but also in the cleaning, food preparation, and serving occupations, as well as in production occupations, that is manufacturing. So this is the data from a survey. We decided, and Fabiola is actually a former student at COLEF. She got her PhD here at COLEF, and we decided to write this article together. It's kind of difficult to see this table, but I want to just focus on what, as you can see, there are different the characteristics of naturalized citizens. Okay, that means these migrants who we interviewed who became U.S. citizens. As you can see, many of them, most of them, the naturalized citizens obtain skilled occupations. However, there is the case of B, which is Victor, 60 years old, from Veracruz, who studied medicine, but at the time of the interview, he was working in as a children entertainment assistant. He had worked before as a nurse, so he never got a professional occupation, even though he was a U.S. citizen. And then, in the case of the legal permanent residents, that means that they are allowed to work in the U.S. There are also different cases there are also cases of people, the last two cases, who didn't get a professional occupation. Let's say Alberto, who is 36 from Veracruz, and he studied sociology, like our friend here, Jorge, but he ended up working as a hotel worker. So even though he is, I'm not saying that studying sociology leads you to nowhere. I'm just saying that this is a particular case in which this woman, sorry, is a female, she didn't get a professional occupation. And then we have also a teacher of mathematics who became a high school teacher also. Let's just go back to the last most interesting case, that is the undocumented immigrants who are also skilled, but they were undocumented at the time of the interview in 2008. Well, in this case, let me just call your attention to P, which is a woman, let's say Patricia, female, 47 years old, also from Veracruz. And I want to mention that we also interviewed people from Zacatecas, Oaxaca, and Veracruz, three states in Mexico that have different migration patterns to the United States. In the case of Patricia, she entered the United States in 1996. She is undocumented, and she is a nurse. A dentist, sorry, a dentist. We wanted to protect their identities. That's why we sort of generalized the occupations. No, she's a dentist, and very interesting, she was working as a dentist assistant, and in her job, she met a Filipino dental assistant who told her, you can revalidate your studies from Mexico. And she did that. And as a result of that, she became a dentist. And now she is a professional dentist in the United States, but she is undocumented. That's why we wanted to protect. That is 2 minutes? Yes. Okay. Conclusion in 2 minutes. Of our 20 interviewees from Zacatecas, Oaxaca, and Veracruz, 10 out of 20 held unskilled occupations, or 10 have also professional occupations, so 10 and 10. Immigrants who obtain a professional occupation in the US were able to strategically use their investment in human capital and their access to social capital regardless of their immigration status. Here we can see the agency of people, that even though they are undocumented or they have only studies from a small university, let's say in Zacatecas or in Veracruz, they were able to get ahead regardless of their situation. However, immigration status turned out to be the most important factor in differentiating who obtains a skilled occupation and who does not. So immigration status is key to understand who is able to do that. This is very important now that they are discussing in the US the new immigration reform. Very interesting, and few immigrants benefited from US immigration policy because there are a lot of visas for permanent or temporary stay in the US, as I mentioned before, because the US immigration policy favors the immigration of skilled migrants, and they do not use that. For instance, the H-1B visa for professionals, the TN visa for the professionals in North America, that means Canada, Mexico, and the US, and Rodolfo Cruz has conducted research on this visa. Very few of our interviewees use these visas. It's very easy to get a TN visa, very, very easy. If you have, even though you have a sociology diploma, you can get a visa with a professional degree and also an offer of job in the United States. Finally, in terms of, that's a mistake, professional networks, sorry, not occupations. Professional networks are more important than Mexican social networks. So when these migrants are able to meet and get to know people in the same occupations, they usually took advantage of that, like the case of this dentist. But in the case of using Mexican social networks, that means from their communities of origin in Mexico, those networks lead to niches of low skill jobs. So this is the conclusion of our study, and I hope that they publish the article. And just to say the last thing is that this is just an example in which a student from Collyer can publish with a professor, so we benefit each other, and it is a very interesting research that Fabiola conducted that probably will be published soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alafon. Okay. You deserve it. Well, now it's time to Guillermo Alonso to present. I'm going to keep you on time.
15 minutes.
Just 15
Okay.
minutes.
Yo haré un híbrido como Rodolfo y Rafael. Hablaré 5 minutos sobre su presentación y otros 5 minutos me avisas para presentar algo. Okay? So, I was born in Canary Island. My English teacher are English tourists, but I am a bad student, and my accent is now from Tijuana. Okay, but I prefer talk about your presentation 5 minutes, and the last 5 minutes about some picture. Forget this. I will talk about the qualitative evidence, but I prefer this Rodolfo formula. No? In the 90s, I worked in the Centro de Estudios Africanos in Barcelona, Center for African Studies at Barcelona, and I studied the Moroccan people that live in the old town, all right? And a few people from Alger, but the main group is from the north of Morocco. I am interested in the ethnic group of the Berber, but my relation with the international migration was in Barcelona. From 1997, I live here in Mexico, and from 1999, I work here in Tijuana. I work in the Collyer, and in the last years, I am trying to make a comparative approach between the European Union, Morocco border, Melilla, Canary Island, the Pateras and Cayucos problem, and I want to make a comparative reflection with this side of the world, with the US-Mexican border. It's very difficult to make this comparison. Another question that I like of your presentation is the Melilla specific topic of the border, because the Melilla border is also the European Union border. It's a case different from Gibraltar. It's a colony, Gibraltar? I don't know. But the last night in the Melilla border, the sub-Saharan group of migrants jumped the border. Melilla is a hot spot in the world of the clandestine migration, irregular migration. Avísame cuando tengas 5 minutos porque se fue el día, I think that today you explain some questions that are very interesting for understand this case of the Melilla of the north of Morocco. I like something that you say from people to Senegal, the danger like a stimulus. The danger is good. The danger is attractive. The danger is attractive. Yeah, I think that in this border, the danger for some people is attractive. It's like a passage ritual. Yeah, but the question of risk, I think that we can think about this resort for the people, sub-Saharan people in Africa, and sub-Saharan and Mexican and Central American people in the US-Mexican border. Because we work about the risk and vulnerability here like a problem. But I think, listen you, that there is a side, attractive side in this question. We will think about this topic. Another question. I will like about the qualitative proof, qualitative evidence, and I will like your point of view about the picture, like evidence, about the if we, the qualitative researcher, can be competitive in our work with the people that use metric evidence. So sorry. This is a problem. Quantitative. The people talk about metric. I like the metric. This is a problem in colleagues. It's not a war, but it's an interesting reto, no? Challenge. Okay. I want to my PowerPoint, please. And I show you some picture about the U.S.-Mexican border. Se aprieta por aquí, ¿no? Are you sure? Okay. Forget this. Forget this. Forget this. This is the old border in Tijuana Beach. But in the last 20 years, we look deep change in the conception of the border. Okay, right? And this is now the different 5 years. Okay, no, le quiero mostrar, sí, pero le quiero mostrar esto, no. This is in the 2005, all right? This is now. I see the Melilla border, all right? And this border is like the same political point of view about the clandestine migration, irregular migration. This is the... ¿El rayo láser dónde es? No, no funciona. Sí, sí. This is the electronic cameras, right? Like Melilla. And this chain was made in the last 5 years. But I think that we have a similar or formal evidence to make or trying to make a comparative approach between the Spanish Melilla town border and this border. It's a hypothesis. But the history is very important for understand this border. Look at. No funciona. Look at on the right this tree. All right. All right. Pat Nixon, the Nixon wife. ¿Cómo se dice plantando? Planting the tree. He understands the Spanish War. Okay. This is Pat Nixon in the 1972 planting this tree that we have here in the border, and this is the old border in the 70s in Tijuana. The change is radical change in 40 years. All right, yeah. The history is very important for understand this border and the change in the last 40 years about the policy and the people. This is the barbed fence, all right? The old U.S.-Mexican border. This is the tree, the patty, yeah. All right. The people don't know this history, but it's very interesting. This is the evidence. U.S. Army building the fence, steel fence on the beach, but the army is working in Mexico territory. The politics in Mexico say, oh no, the army is not in Mexico to work in the world. Yeah, the army is working in Mexico to make the war. the evidence, the photographic evidence, the picture evidence, is necessary for understand this border, but also the history of the border, the U.S.-Mexico border. This is my thesis. 2 minutes. Y como mi inglés va más lento, no hay manera de. Okay, no. Look at the back of the T-shirt, all right? U.S. Army, yeah? And now, the people, se cambió the T-shirt. Oh. The evidence, okay? They changed the T-shirt of the, yeah. The evidence of these people don't like that I take picture about your work. Another question is I am interested in the death of the migrant crossing the border. This is the Arizona desert. Dije desierto y no desayuno, ¿no? Arizona, this picture is the Carabeo, Alfonso Carabeo, the Collyer photograph. All right. This is the road that the migrants take to go to the north in the Arizona. The U.S.-Mexican border is in some point in this landscape. All right. But this is a different border because between Canary Island and Mauritania and Morocco and Senegal, this is the sea, the ocean. The border, the control border is very different, but the investigation about this border, maritime border, is different to this case. All right. How can we do anthropology or ethnography here? It's very difficult. All right, and we are inventing a new ethnography, but I talk about this another day. This is the bands that go to the U.S.-Mexican border, all right? But this territory is the narco territory, all right? And this is the problem. This is the U.S.-Mexico border is different to the actually in Tijuana Beach, all right? This is Tijuana. Another question, the picture evidence. This is in the south of California, near to Calexico. 1 minute? Okay. Vamos a ver fotos. The evidence, when the border patrol catch the migrant is a problematic event, not necessary. 1 border patrol and 3 migrants. Okay, but we have the problem of the violence of the border patrol. All right, this is a topic in the natura. The desert, many people dead in the desert of South California and South Arizona. And many people dead drowned in this channel, all-American channel, all right, Canal Todo Americano. The people dead in the desert and the people there dead in the water of the channel. This is in the south of California and near of Arizona. The anthropology take giving water to a Mexican migrant in the Arizona desert. Espero que Estados Unidos no vea esta foto, me quita la visa. All right. The rest can help to the migrant in the desert. It's another question. And these are ¿cómo se dice? Desconocidos, muertos. Unknown migrant in the near of Calexico cemetery, all right? Don't forget. And now it's John Doe is the name of U.S. Mexican authority gives to these people that are now John Doe. And the question of translation of the English to Spanish is another question. Homeland security, fighting terror in science. Says Jerónimo and your people. All right. ¿No me quedan 5 minutos más? O sea,
no more.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guillermo.
No, thank you for you for it.
Now it's time for Dr. Eduardo Gonzalez, please. 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you.
Well, I'm going to present to you the migration surveys in Mexico borders. I'm going to try to do this so fast as possible to show all this information. Well, what about the EMIF? The EMIF is a survey, a big survey. Is running from 1993 in the northern border of Mexico, and from 2004 at the south border of Mexico. We are working off all these cities along the border in the north, in the airports of these big cities at the center of Mexico, and in some border cities at the Guatemala-Mexico border, and some points at the airports, and returning migrants in the border between Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The EMIF is a large project from the federal government of Mexico. This has been a participation of INAMI at the beginning of the project, and CONAPO and Relaciones Exteriores at the Foreign Relationships Ministry, Health Ministry, and Labor Ministry, and the Population Council of Mexico. It's we are working in 12 different flows. We are trying to measure these flows and to characterize these flows. So we are having data for 20 years for the Mexico to the U.S. Migration, and 9 years from for the migration from Central America to Mexico and the United States. This is a graphic to show how what are the flows we are observing at the northern border. We are interviewing those migrants which came from the south of Mexico, and understanding south, every place south of the border, or the border cities, who are trying to cross to the United States, or they are staying at the border cities. And we interview the people who are coming voluntarily from the United States, those Mexicans who return to Mexico to visit family, or returning definitely because they ended their stay in the United States. And we interview the returned migrants from the immigration authorities from United States. These are the localities where we interview the flow south-north. I think I'm missing now. There are 12 cities we are working in this survey. Almost all the cities are border are exactly on the border with the United States, except for Altar and Cananea. Those cities are not exactly on the border, but we detected an important flow of undocumented migrants who stay in those cities waiting for the time to go to the border and cross it. This is the localities where we interview the north-south migrants. It's in the 9 cities of the border and these 4 airports on the central Mexico. Because we detected at the beginning of the project, we detect the migrants cross the border by driving their own cars or maybe to take a flight in some cities to go to the south of Mexico or taking a bus to go to the south. But we detected around 2005 or 6 maybe an important increasing of the migrants take a flight in any part of the United States and go directly to the Mexico City, Guadalajara, Morelia, or León airport, and then displaced to their nearest cities they are coming from originally. And and the returned migrants, we interviewed them at these 9 localities. These cities are not random selection, they are the points where the immigration authorities has the agreement with the Mexican authorities to deliver the migrants. So we are working in these cities. Some of them has been new ones like San Luis de Colorado. It was a city. It's a city increasing the returning flow. And in the MIF-Sur, we are working in 4 localities in the border. Santa Elena is not exactly a border city, but as the case of Altar and Cananea, we detected that in this city, migrants from Honduras go to try to cross to Mexico. This area is the Petén. It's a very forest place, so it's easy to cross de manera clandestina way. So we are interviewing this flow in this locality, Santa Elena, and in La Mesilla, El Carmen, and Tecunumán, for the flows coming from the south to the north. In the case of the flow north to south, we are working on those 3 points of the border. We are interviewing here only those Guatemalan migrants. In the case of the returned by Mexican authorities to Central America, we are working at La Mesilla and El Carmen in Guatemala, El Corinto in Honduras, and in San Salvador in El Salvador. And for those who are returning from U.S. immigration authorities, we are working at El Aeropuerto La Aurora in Guatemala City, Aeropuerto de Comalapa in San Salvador City, and Airport of San Pedro Sula in Honduras. And this is a graphic to show how we design the sampling frame, how we select the units of sampling. We have, for one side, the geographical units. We detect where in a region, in a city, in a zone, and in a point, the migration flows are concentrated. At the same time, we define temporal units as a trimester, days and hours of the day. We can see where the migrants are trying to, or in movement. So we detect this units, geographical and temporary, and then we selected and then go to the places, to those times, and interview the, well, first we detect if they are migrants, and we interview them. The first sampling frame for the EMIF Norte was made in 1992. In that case, we worked at 20 localities to detect the migratory flows. We detected that 10 localities of those 20 concentrate 95 of migratory flows. Which cities are in which working actually? Tijuana, Mexicali, Nogales, Agua Prieta, Ciudad Juárez, etc. We are covering practically the entire northern border, and we are working continuously in updating this sampling frame. Along the year, we have reports from our fieldwork persons who says if they know about the changes in the dynamic of the migratory flows. Well, this is the way we do this. In a week, in an entire week, 24 hours at 7 days, we are enumerating people and detecting if they are migrants. With this information, we can measure the proportion of migrants in every way of the flows. This is the questions we use to detect a migrant in the general flow. We have their sex. We ask for their age. We ask for their place of birth. We ask for the country of residence. If they are going to the United States or to Mexico, in the case of EMIF Sur, if they are coming to Mexico to work. And when we ask all these questions and we have a positive result, we apply a large questionnaire. If not, we continue with our searching of migrants. This is another example of our questions we apply to detect migrants. The main results of the EMIF, well, we find in 2008 a decreasing of the migration from Mexico to the United States. This fall down has been until today. We can see now it's not so fast diminution of the migration to the United States, but it's in the lowest point of at least 12 years. In contrary, we find a rise of the return migration from the United States in the case of the voluntary flow as well as the returned flow. This survey is unique because we can know if the migrants have documents, the pink column, or if they have not documents to cross to the United States. We found a fall of the proportion of undocumented migration to the United States and an increasing in 2011 and 2012. This proportion, the flow is low, but the proportion of the undocumented are increasing. The time expended in United States by Mexican migrants, we returned to Mexico by U.S. authorities. In 1995, the entire flow of returned migrants were people who were captured by Border Patrol crossing the border. so they expended less 1 day in that country. And now, 2011, we found 15% of these people. Okay, just in the case of Sul, we found a big amount annually of migrants proceeding from Guatemala who are entering to Mexico to work or to transit to go to United States. This is the time. It's a very local flow. The green areas are the origin of these Guatemalan migrants, and in the red ones are the place of destiny in Chiapas mainly. It's a cross-border migration in this case. In the case of the migration from Guatemala or among Guatemala and Mexico, it's a documented migration because it's easier to get a document to came to Mexico to work than to get for a Mexican to get a document to go to the United States to work. These are the amounts of Central American migrants returned from Mexican authorities to their beer countries. We are watching an increasing of these amounts, especially in the Honduras and Guatemala flows. And we detect that in the case of the Guatemalan migrants, they are coming to Mexico to stay in Mexico in 60–70%. In the case of the Honduras migration, is just they are in Mexico just to go to the United States, as well as in the case of El Salvador migration. So we are talking about here a transit migration. And this is the amount of Central American migrants returned from the United States authorities and who cross to Mexico to go to enter to the United States. So we are looking at an increasing of 3 flows as well. Commercial, we have a website. You can find here indicators, annual publications, and the databases for the EMIF Norte as well as the EMIF Sur. This is the address, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, this is the end of this section. Now it's time for the students to present their projects.
Okay, we're gonna begin the part of where the postgraduate students are going to present their thesis name and their objective, which is in the papers I gave you. We will begin with the students from the master degree program in population studies. And we'll begin with the first one, who's Mirna. Mirna will read the slide, and we will go on. And at the end, if there's time and you can make some comments, we will be very grateful. Okay. Next. Okay, Mirna.
Hi, my name is Mirna Bañuelos. I'm a student of Master Population Studies. The title of my research is Zacatecan Immigrant Women in the United States Between the Settlement and the Return. Okay, in the context of the 2008 U.S. economic crisis, militarization or control of its southern border, and the anti-immigrant policies, and within the broader context of the history of migration between Mexico and the United States, with an emphasis on the case of Zacatecas as a traditional source of immigrants. The objective is to identify the economic and social factors involved in the decision to stay in the U.S. or return to Mexico of working-age women from Zacatecas who are living with a partner and are U.S. residents. That's it.
Okay, Maria Inés.
Hi, my name is Maria Inés Barrios. I am a student of Master in Population Studies. The title of my thesis project is Factor Associated with Emigration in Ciudad Juárez, an analysis of Veracruz, New Mexico, and Texas. In the past 3 decades, the city of Juárez has been characterized as an attraction for potential migrants to the city from both the center and south of the country. This is due to its strong manufacturing industry and the behavior is its labor market. The city has maintained a population dynamic with higher growth rates at the national level. In 2009, Juárez began hosting a migratory exodus motivated by social instability, thus causing a wave of violence that triggered the 2007 Operation Against Organized Crime in Mexico. Additionally, the economic slowdown of the 2008 U.S. recession contributed to Juárez's migratory climate. From this context, the objective of research possessed is the following: to determine the factor associated with change in migration patterns in Ciudad Juárez, emphasizing the emigration flow toward Veracruz, Texas, and New Mexico within a context of economic crisis and violence in the last 5 years. Broadly speaking, this is my research of my thesis proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Inés. Okay, Jesus.
Hi, I am Jesus Flores. My title is Looking Those Who Go By, a study of Mexican perception of the transient Central American migration. The objective is to identify how social demographic characteristics impact the perception Mexican population has about Central American migrants in transit through Mexico.
Okay, thank you, Jesus. Gilberto.
Hi, my name is Mijail Flores, and the name of my study is Return Migration of Mexican Skilled Workers. The objective of this study is centered in the comparison of the socio-demographic characteristics and volume of returned skilled Mexican migrants with the non-skilled in the periods 1995 to 2000 and 2005 and 2010. And this study attempts to find if there is a loss of human researches for Mexico. That's it.
Thank you, Mijail. Guadalupe.
My name is Guadalupe Garcia. I'm a student of Masters in Population Studies. The research I intend to do is titled Unemployment, Insecurity, and the Dynamics of Migration. Comparative Analysis of Ciudad Juárez and Tijuana, 2000-2010. The general objective is to analyze how changes in migration dynamics are related to unemployment and public insecurity in both cities. These objectives arise from that in the last few years, Mexican border cities have experienced an important decrease in their population growth rate, as well as a negative impact in their economic dynamics, situations that have led to an increase in the unemployment indicators. This crisis could be explained by observing the labor force dynamic and the relation with the migratory process by stating that a big share of the trends and characteristics the labor force have been explained by the characteristics and magnitude of migration flows leading to them. Furthermore, the insecurity and violence context has permeated society. Thanks.
Thank you, Guadalupe. Eric?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My title of my research is Reasons to Migrate, an analysis of the migratory experience of unaccompanied underage Mexicans to the United States. And the objective is to describe and analyze the principal reasons of the Mexican unaccompanied minors to migrate to the United States through the analysis of their migratory experience. Yep.
Thank you, Eric. Joaquin?
Hi, I'm Joaquin. I'm going to investigate the involuntary migrants' perspective and social demographic profile of Mexican American infants, comparative study between Puebla and Zacatecas. We have that in 2010 census was living in Mexico about 700,000 of American citizens, and a half of millions was children minors of 15 years old, and 3,000 of them comes in the last 5 years. So the object is to describe the demographic profile of Mexican American infants currently residing in Mexico, and the second one objective is to know and compare the perspective infants from Puebla and Zacatecas have about the voluntary or forced return of their parents from the United States.
Thank you, Joaquin. Juan?
Hi, everybody. My name is Juan from Colombia. It's a pleasure to Curie. The importance of information systems about the missing migrants. My objective is identify the current information systems about missing Central American migrants in transit through Mexico between 2006 and 2012. And I want to know what strategies use different NGO and governments in the search for migrant missing in the flow between North Africa and European Union.
Okay, thanks. Juan, Jorge Valentin.
Hi, my name is Jorge Mosqueira, and the tentative title for my thesis is Mexican Migratory Policy at the Beginning of the 21st Century and its implications on undocumented transit migration. The purpose of the study is to analyze how Mexican migration policy has impacted the undocumented migration from Central America to the USA in its transit through Mexico. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge Valentin. Now we're going to hear the presentation of the students from the master's degree program in regional development, starting with Elizabeth.
Hi, welcome to Tijuana. Well, my title of my project research is the education and migration, the adaptation process in teenagers living in Baja California, Mexico. I want to analyze the migration condition and the accessibility to high school. We'll focus on teenager sectors in Baja California to understand what happened during the adaptation process into school and how the migration is affecting the knowledge. I want to know how the state education services are handling with these people, with these teenagers here in Baja California, how the family are influencing in their education, and how are they own expectations about the education in the future.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Gabriel?
Thank you. Hi, nice to meet you. Welcome to Tijuana. The title of my research is about deportation. I am interested in study and see what happened with deportees from the United States here in Tijuana. And the title is Impacts of Social Networks in Forced Return Migration Process. Case study of Mexican men recently deported by U.S. immigration authorities implementing new strategies to live in Tijuana, Baja California. Why the study? Because the percentage of deportees from the United States have been increasing. Mexican migrants who have stayed in the U.S. for 30, 35, or 40 years, living there, making their lives there. So I want to see what happened with people who's been returned to their country. So I want to see anthropologically what happened with them. So the objective is analyze how Mexican migrants deported to Mexico use and maintain ties of kinship constructed for a long stay in the United States to survive. So I am using transnationalism and theoretical concept about embeddedness to see if we are talking about integration or a long stay in Mexico, about people who have stayed so many years in the U.S. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. Carla?
Good afternoon. My research project is entitled New Transnational Cooperation Forms and Organizational Practice. It's analysis of 3 political programs to promotion the local development in Zacatecas, Mexico. And considering the existence of 3x1 program for migrants in the state of Zacatecas, this research project aims to analyze and explain the different transnational cooperation schemes in which assume the coordination of efforts and the existence of a clear and safe commitment linking the different actors involved, where the procedures are important, the negotiation forms, and the actionability. Besides, results interesting to know also if the local government assumes the role of leading element that allows the bill structure, coordinating participation and mobilization process, and how is the participation of hometown association in these new schemes, where the dialogue, participation, and resources, it breaks with the traditional management model and promotes a system of cooperation with public characteristics and not care that allows implement projects that promote development that adapts over time to the conditions of the territory.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Now we're gonna give Peter some minutes for him to present on behalf of all the doctoral students what they are doing in migration.
Hi again. Actually, we have 7 students from different disciplinary backgrounds with different approaches and subjects concerning the Mexican migration system. So all of the 7 are working on migration issues between Mexico and the USA, or Central America, Mexico and the USA. Unfortunately, it was not possible to gather everyone for today's session because some are abroad or doing field research or can't be with us due to other reasons. So the disciplinary backgrounds are demography. We have a demographer called Luis Enrique Calva Sanchez, and he's working with Rafael Alarcón, who was presenting today. He's working on qualified Mexican immigration in the United States and subutilization of capacities. And he's interested, his objective of study is according to the labor incorporation and the subutilization of capacities. He is trying to explain the role of social networks and the US immigration policy as factors associated to the labor route of qualified migrants. So he's interested in the skilled or qualified migrants. Another compañera, Aida Silva Hernandez, she's a historian and is working on adolescents, which are here deported in Tijuana alone, and she's interested in the relation between institutions that offer assistance and the capacity of agency at the US-Mexico border. She wants to get to know the situation of not accompanied adolescent Mexican and Central American migrants who find themselves in situations of repatriation and in a transit migratory experience. She wants to get to know what it means to them and which actions they take from then on, no? From the moment of deportation, and is also interested in what they do to restore the migratory project, which was interrupted, no? Through deportation, and the deportation process of adolescents or minors, which are not accompanied by their fathers or their parents. They get deported through the embassies. Yeah? It's not the regular deportation process, so she's interested what can they do, how they get in contact with their families, and to restore their migration project, because many adolescents that migrate, they try to reunite with families that already are at the other side, and is also looking to find out about the internal and external support they receive, institutional networks, family links, etc. Jasmine Garcia Gomez, I think she's economist. She's economist and is working working on remittances, consumption, and investment, analyzing households in Mexico, and in detail the case of Guanajuato, Mexican state of Guanajuato. Yolanda, she's with us, but she asked me to present her topic, is demographer and is working on Mexican immigration policy and vulnerability of Central Americans on their transit route through Mexico. She already did some field research going to Tapachula, which is a southern border town, going into Guatemala, Honduras, and I think El Salvador, doing her field research. Sociologist Yetzi Rosales Martinez is actually in UCLA.
Yes.
Movilidad estudiantil, like exchange.
Doing field work.
Doing field work, yeah. She's working on migration and labor incorporation of professional Mexican nurses in the United States. She wants to do closer research on the relation between the labor incorporation process of Mexican immigrant nurses in California and the institutional, formal and informal networks which are present in their migratory experience. Another demographer, Jose Franco Aguilar, he's working on return migration. The title of his thesis is Return Migrants, Impact of the Return Conditions on the Social and Labor Reincorporation from a Gender Perspective. He also did, he's applying mixed methodology. He's working quantitative and qualitative. I think he got back from field in Jalisco. He's working in some small towns in Jalisco, and he was doing like qualitative interviews, especially from a gender perspective and return migration. And my topic, I already talked to you, is about migratory control policies, border surveillance, and civil society participation in defense of undocumented migrants, human rights, here in Tijuana, San Diego. So these are our PhD students working on migration. From different perspectives, we are going to provide a list to you with all the names and emails and the subject, the topics. So if in case there's closer interest, you can contact some of my colleagues, and that's it for now. So, thank you.
Okay, Michael, we would like to hear some words from you, if you have some comments on the presentations the students made, and I know it's too much.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to say, and the overwhelming impression is of the quality of the research that's being done here, the diversity of the topics, and the engagement of everybody.
Excuse me, can you put the microphone close?
There we go.
Your mouth.
That's it. Thank you. And I wish that if somebody came from Mexico to hear a presentation of the master's students at the University of Sussex, that they could manage it in Spanish. I suspect the answer would be that they wouldn't be able to manage it in Spanish. Certainly I wouldn't be able to chair it in Spanish. But so thank you very much indeed for those presentations. It's obviously very difficult to comment individually. I've scribbled down a few notes as people were going. And the things which seemed to stand out were, that I think is particularly valuable in master's thesis, is the focus on a particular element of concern. And that might be a sort of historical element, like the impact of the recent crisis, that the first Mima's and Maria Eñez, your presentations sort of linked into the impact of the current crisis in the United States on particular decisions to move. Others had focused on particular populations of concern, in some cases situations that had arisen quite recently. So I think there's a real value in these projects which focus on something which is happening right now. And that's one of the areas where master's dissertations, because they have the sort of flexibility to pick up on something which is changing faster even than I think in some cases PhD dissertations can manage. In some cases you start a PhD dissertation and the situation changes while you're in the middle of it, and by the time you finish it, the situation is quite dramatically different. So one of the real strengths of master's dissertations is one of the things that you're all doing, focusing on something quite recent. Beyond that, it's difficult to know what to say. It would be very interesting to hear more about the particular changes and themes that you're all focusing on. Particularly the number of you working with transit migrants is obviously very interesting to my own research in Morocco, and your question about the systems of tracing people I think is a really significant one, and that is and I don't really have an easy answer to that. There are some organisations in Morocco. There's one I could put you in touch with immediately, called the Association of AFVIC, the Association of Families and Victims of Clandestine Migration, and they provide some kind of information to people from West Africa, for example, who want to find out what happened to someone who left a year ago and no one has heard of since, for example. This is the kind of thing that you're talking about, yeah. And this is, it's a tremendous concern, and that's one of the real difficulties of these sort of highly hazardous migrations is how to trace people, how to identify people, and these photos of the sort of entire field of people just labelled John Doe. I mean, there are similar contexts in Europe, obviously, and the ways in which people can be traced. I mean, if you start thinking about the practicalities of it, it's very difficult. I mean, it has to get down to sort of DNA testing for people to be absolutely certain and that is an area where resources are required that people just don't have. So that's a real concern. But it's a really important question. When we're dealing with lives that are as valuable as any other lives, that has to be what we're focusing on. Things I've scribbled down. I don't want to do anyone a disservice because I think the work that you're doing is very valuable, and I would be really interested in hearing more about it. From the PhD side, I think it would be very advantageous to students at Sussex and hopefully to students here to form a definitive link, particularly around this student conference that I mentioned, which is going to take place in September. And if we can sort of facilitate some way in which students could participate virtually in that, then that would be a very positive development. But it's very difficult to comment in more detail on presentations that just on the basis of a slide and a quick objective. But thank you very much, and do get in touch with me if you have any particular questions that you think I might help with, particularly on these issues of transit. I'd be very happy to hear from everyone, and it's congratulations on the research. I think I'll leave it there if that's okay.
Okay, we have some time left. If someone wants to ask about his own project.
Announcement. You can do it in Spanish, slow. Pueden hacerlo en español, un poco lento. El profesor Collyer entiende, pero la respuesta será en inglés.
50%.
¿Sí? Gabriel.
I got a question about my topic and related to your work. During my research, during my investigation about studies, journals, books, and so many other sources, talking about Mexican migration to the United States, there are a lot of studies related to Mexicans in the United States. Social, economic, political things related to Mexican in the United States, or the relationship between Mexico and the US and migration policy. But I haven't found a lot or so many research about deportation. What happened with deportees staying in Mexico? Not just recently migrants who are trying to cross to the United States, and I mean, it's very easy. You're going to go to the border and you're going to see, and it's immediately the movement. But here I am talking about Mexicans who have stayed in the United States for so many time, make their lives there, children grow up there, but there are many who are undocumented. What happened when this kind of people is catch, detained, and deported to a country, but it's not their country? I mean, you interview them, and they speak in English, they think like an American, so they live in the United States. But what happened when they stay in Mexico? I mean, Mexican authorities help a little bit. They try to pay a bus to go to their town. But what is their town? Their town is LA, San Diego, or Washington. And I want to know, and the question is, if you have what kind of studies in Europe or in the countries of origin, there are some researchers who are writing about these kind of topics. What happened with African people who return forcibly or forced return to African countries, and what happened with them? I mean, what kind of process, social processes happen with this kind of people? Thank you.
That's a great question. Shall I answer?
Yes.
Yeah, that's. And I think this is one of the areas where there is really current concern because of this rise in deportations, and the same kind of thing is happening from Europe. And mainly for that reason, there is very little in Europe, and from what I'm aware of here. There's one project called MIREM, carried out by a guy called Jean-Pierre Casarino at the European University Institute in Florence, which looked at return to Morocco and Tunisia. And he's now working in a couple of East European countries as well. And the point of that study was to compare the impacts of forced and voluntary return. So they identified people who had been forcibly deported, and they identified people who had returned voluntarily, and it was a direct comparative study on reintegration. And unsurprisingly, they looked at a variety of other. It was fairly. I think they were working with groups of 100 to 150 people in each country, so it was reasonably large scale return of each 100 to 150 forced return, 100 to 150 voluntary return. And unsurprisingly, the means of return was the most significant factor influencing their possibilities of reintegration. So those people who had returned voluntarily had, according to their measures, and this is something that, depending on the sort of theoretical frame you're using, would be relevant. How do you measure integration? I mean, that's in itself a difficult question. But according to the measures of reintegration that they were using, the forced or voluntary return was the most important single factor determining return. I've done one of the themes of my research in Sri Lanka was on return from the UK to Sri Lanka. And one of the things I set out to find was people who had been forcibly returned. And it was tremendously difficult. It was possible to identify people who had returned under these, what's very popular in the European Union called voluntary assisted return schemes, where people who are undocumented or who are at some stage in the asylum process can go to, usually to the International Organization for Migration, voluntarily return, and they're paid some money to return. And we were looking at individuals who had come back under this scheme at least 1 year after they had returned. One of my colleagues, Richard Black, did some work with for the Home Office, the UK Home Office, to look at measures of integration, and came up with a framework. I can give you that link. It's a 2004 paper which might be useful, looking at sort of physical and political safety. Essentially, were people who had claimed asylum and were then returned, were they safe on return? And another factor was things around sort of socioeconomic. Were they able to find a job? And the third, which is only really relevant in cases of very large-scale return, like return from Pakistan to Afghanistan, for example, about the overall aggregate stability of the country. And they looked at subjective factors. So did the individuals themselves feel that they were well integrated, associated with society? And objective factors, to the extent that they're relevant, and did they have a job or not? And in some cases they don't necessarily match up. Somebody could have a job and feel very dissatisfied, and somebody could not have a job and actually feel quite happy with the situation. And then again, this sort of aggregate factor. So it was a sort of framework that they used that I tried to apply in Sri Lanka with these individuals that I returned, that I was interviewing who had been returned. So there's a couple of things there. We wrote a review paper that came out last year of that again I can send you. So if just send me an email. I don't know. I assume my email is around, but it's m.collyer, Collyer, at sussex.ac.uk. I don't know if it's on this program. But you're very welcome to drop me a line and let me know, and I can send you copies of those papers. Which have some references to other papers in, but there's relatively little. I think it's an important topic, and it's one of the most controversial aspects of European Union policy recently has been the 2008 Returns Directive, that was criticised in the Latin American Parliament. I mean, it's almost unprecedented, that sort of level of diplomatic criticism of European Union migration policy, because it allows for very significant detention of migrants before return. And one of the policies around that was to oblige European Union countries who were returning people to check up on what was happening to them, to identify whether they were safe after return. Because in a lot of cases, this is individuals who've arrived who claimed asylum, who said, you can't send me back because I fear for my life in my country of origin, and a decision has been made to reject their application, and then they're returned. And in some cases this happens, and individuals are arrested at the airport and tortured. And this has happened to a number of the individuals that I interviewed in Sri Lanka. So there was a proposal to incorporate some sort of obligation into this directive on European member states to check up on that, and it was rejected by the Council. So unsurprisingly perhaps, because that would have been tremendously onerous, but that sort of, there was discussions about introducing this sort of verification into some sort of policy framework, and it didn't work out. So it's a difficult thing to do, and a very valuable thing to do, I think. Drop me a line, I'll send you those papers, and good luck with the research. It sounds good.
Rafael.
Gracias. Bueno, primero quisiera pedir dos disculpas. Una, tuve que salir media hora y quería escuchar realmente a los estudiantes, entonces una disculpa. También una disculpa por mi broma sobre los sociólogos, Jorge, de ninguna manera, no quiero decirlo, de ninguna manera fue inapropiado, sí, porque Jorge pues, es un excelente estudiante. Y bueno, todas las ciencias sociales están en crisis, y si allá vamos, pues a lo mejor los de social anthropology, en la que yo estoy, probablemente esté más difícil. Entonces sí, una disculpa. Now, I just want to, I really appreciate your visit to Collyer, because I think that we really need to establish a close relationship. Because I really recognize that Sussex University is probably the only university in the world that took the risk of offering a PhD in migration studies. And that's here at Collyer, we can do that. We could do that, but we are so afraid of taking risks. That's why, yeah, because if we ask our students here and we ask them why are they here, they will probably tell you that they came here because they wanted to study migration. Probably not the master programs, but migration. And that's why I think that this relationship that we are now developing is going to be very useful. I know that Josefina Perez, who is now in Monterrey, is one of the PhD, a person who obtained a PhD in migration studies, and that is very useful for an institution. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope that people here can benefit from those kind of links. I mean, I certainly think that the students at the University of Sussex would benefit tremendously from a link here. But again, Collyer has this reputation for being a very pro-migrant research institution, and I think that's really important too, to focus research, and I think that's reflected in the topics that a lot of people have here, to focus research on potentially emancipatory research, on research that provides the information to improve the livelihoods of migrants. And that's very positive.
Josefina, ¿quieres comentar algo?
Sorry, I didn't mean to push the wrong button. No, just to thank Mike, and I hope you enjoy your stay in Tijuana. I think that you'll be taken to somewhere, well, I know you're taken to the hostels for migrants and also to the border, so it will be a quite experience to compare what you saw in Morocco, for instance. And so good luck and have fun. And thank you very much.
See you soon.
Okay, ¿alguna pregunta? ¿No? Your email.
Yeah. Sure. Shall I don't know if there's a computer I can write it on, so it appears up here. It's m.Collyer, Collyer.
Yes, like in the program.
That's me. Which is big.
No, está en la página.
m.Collyer at Sussex, SUSSEX .ac.uk.
Yeah, look.
Oh, look at that! Wow.
We have that technology.
We can do this in Sussex. That's it. So yeah, I'd be very interested in hearing more about the research, and do let me know if you have any questions. That's a very rich bunch of research projects. I'm sorry I wasn't able to comment individually on each of them, but I would like the opportunity to do so.
I now it's time to close the meeting, not the relation, because the activities continue. First in the restaurant, and the second in the trip around the 3 points in Tijuana. But I want to thanks to the students of our two programs, and to Peter from PhD. But I want to thank to the professors. We appreciate very much this conversation and the presentations. This event was a collaborative effort between Departamento de Estudios de Población, Maestría de Estudios de Población, Doctorado, Josefina. Well, I think all events are collaborative activities here, and for this reason, thank you very much, Rafael, Guillermo, Rodolfo, and Eduardo. But very, very special thank you, Michael, for staying here with us. Appreciate really very much your visit to Collyer. We hope this first visit be the start along academic relation. I think could be a good future for your students and our students. Finally, here in Collyer we have a commitment to research social and migration with this perspective, quantitative, qualitative, and we want to make comparative researches every time. And this first time, I think, is better for you, for us, and for the research about the migration, international migration processes. And everybody, really thank you for your effort to present, to dedicate few minutes or hours, I don't know, to translate the titles. I think this experience is good for you, in special for me. I think this kind of meetings and the meetings with the professors, not only the professors who visit us, only two professors that we can talk to them in the college, but here in other space is very important for you. And thank you. And Michael, this is for you. It's a constant for your records.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.